Okay, let's unpack this. We're taking a deep dive today into a concept that, well, it sounds simple enough, independence. But when you actually look closely, especially, in the world of corporate governance, it gets pretty complex and vital.
Oh, absolutely vital. It's definitely more than just some buzzword people throw around. It's fundamental.
Right, but defining it, ensuring it actually happens in practice, that seems like the real challenge.
You said exactly.
So today, we're pulling insights from our source material, which really digs into, well, what independence means and why it's just so critical for companies, not just legally, but, ethically, effectively.
Yeah, and our goal here really is to get to the core definition. Understand why it's needed, where it's most needed, and then look at the specific ways, the mechanisms that governance tries to, make it real.
Especially for those key players.
Like auditors and particularly non-executive directors. NEDs.
Yes, NEDs? We'll spend a good chunk of time there because that idea, their independence, it's supposed to be the bedrock of proper oversight, isn't it? Making sure decisions are sound, acting for the shareholders.
It is. And it's fascinating how the source material frames this. It's not just a status like ticking a box.
Yeah.
No, it describes it more as a quality, something individuals possess, almost like intellectual integrity, part of being professional.
Okay, so more than just following rules, it's about being able to act, to decide without being, pushed around by other interests?
Exactly. Free from undue influence. Not constrained by some vested interest that might stop you from doing what's genuinely right.
The ability to, I think the source said, stand apart.
Yeah, stand apart from inappropriate pressures. It uses phrases like being free of managerial capture.
Ooh, managerial capture. That paints a picture.
It does. Or making decisions that are correct and uncontaminated. Uncontaminated by your own personal interests or loyalties.
Okay, so give us an example. The source mentions auditors.
Right, the classic example. An auditor, their ultimate job, their responsibility is to the company's shareholders.
They're checking the books for the owners.
Precisely. But what if that auditor or the audit partner has been friends with the CFO for, say, 20 years? They play golf together, their families know each other.
Okay, I see where this is going.
That closeness, that familiarity, it could subtly compromise things. Maybe they're just a bit less skeptical than they should be.
No, or they give the benefit of the doubt when maybe they shouldn't.
Exactly. Their professional judgment might be swayed, even unintentionally, by that personal relationship. The duty to the shareholders gets blurred.
And that same principle applies, maybe even more critically, to non-executive directors, the NEDs.
Absolutely, which is why, as the source points out, they're often just called independent directors. It's core to their role.
Because they're appointed by shareholders.
Yes, appointed by shareholders, sit on the board, and represent their interests. They're there to oversee the management team on behalf of those owners.
So if that's their job, they absolutely have to be free from being captured, as you said, by the very executives they're meant to be overseeing.
Right. But it's not just the top execs. The source also mentions they need to be independent from other vested interests within the company.
Like who?
Well, maybe powerful employee groups or middle management whose agendas might not always align perfectly with shareholder interests.
Okay. But, in the real world, relationships happen, networks build up over time. It seems hard to imagine total separation.
It is hard. And that's where reality gets, a bit messy. True, absolute independence, like zero prior connection. That's rare in professional circles.
Right. Audit partners work with clients. NEDs serve alongside executives.
Exactly. So the source suggests thinking about it differently, not as an on-off switch, but more like a spectrum, degrees of independence.
A continuum. Okay, tell me more.
So at one end, you've got total independence. Imagine two parties who've never met, no history, no connection whatsoever. Nothing to stop them being completely objective.
Pure detachment.
Right. And at the other extreme, zero independence, where the parties are so close, so intertwined, they basically can't make a move without thinking about the impact on the other person.
Like close family and business together, maybe?
That kind of thing, yeah. Most professional relationships fall somewhere in between.
Not zero, but probably not total either.
Correct. But the key point, especially for these governance roles, is that you want to be as close as possible to that total independence end. That's the goal.
And things are constantly trying to pull you away from that end.
Yes. The source calls these the ethical threats to independence. It lists 5 big ones.
Okay, what are they?
Self-interest, self-review, familiarity, advocacy, and intimidation.
Familiarity we touched on with the auditor example. What about, say, self-interest?
That's where your own gain might cloud your judgment. Maybe you have share options and you become overly focused on just boosting the short-term share price, potentially at the expense of long-term health or, proper governance.
Right, and self-review.
That's like auditing work you yourself prepared. You're less likely to find flaws in your own work.
Okay, makes sense. And this is why we have rules, laws, and codes.
Precisely. Company law, corporate governance codes, they often have specific rules designed to reduce these threats, to push people back towards that independence ideal.
Like making audit partners rotate off an account after a few years.
Exactly. That directly targets the familiarity threat, breaks up those long-term, potentially cozy relationships.
Okay, so let's circle back specifically to NEDs then. Their independence is really hammered home in these governance codes.
It is. Because, again, their main legal duty, their fiduciary duty, is to the shareholders.
Now, the source brings up an interesting debate about NEDs. Where should they come from? Inside the industry or outside?
Yeah, that's a good one. There are decent arguments both ways.
So what's the case for bringing in NEDs with deep industry experience?
Well, the source says they bring obvious benefits. Higher technical knowledge, right? They understand the sector, they often have a great network of contacts, and they get the strategic issues, the competitive landscape. That's valuable in the boardroom.
Sure. Sounds very useful. So what's the downside? Why argue against industry insiders?
The counterargument is that the very same industry knowledge and connections can actually reduce their objectivity.
How so?
Their views might be sort of contaminated by how things have always been done in that sector or by experiences at competitors. And those informal networks, old alliances, they might make it harder to be truly independent from the executives or from industry groupthink.
So bringing someone in from outside the industry, it makes it easier to show they're independent.
That's a big part of it, yes. The source talks about the new broom effect. Someone completely fresh might ask questions everyone inside the bubble stopped asking years ago.
Challenges assumptions.
Exactly. And crucially, they usually don't have those pre-existing business relationships with this specific company. No old baggage, no prior alliances, or, frankly, grudges that could cloud their judgment.
So what do companies actually do? Do they tend to go one way or the other?
In practice, our source suggests most big companies aim for a mix. They value having both.
A blend of talents.
Yeah, a blend. Some NEDs bring that deep industry or technical knowledge. Others bring broader experience, maybe from government, regulation, or leading a large company in a totally different field.
The source gives examples, right? Like retired ministers.
Retired senior government figures, yeah, or former chairs of other big unrelated companies. The key thing, again, seems to be the lack of prior material business dealings with the company itself. That seen is crucial for their independence.
Okay, combining that specific know-how with genuine detachment makes sense. So, apart from who gets picked, what specific rules or measures do these governance codes actually use to try and boost NED independence?
Well, the codes and laws lay out several concrete provisions, though, how strictly they're enforced can vary a lot, depending on where you are.
Okay, give us some examples. What's typical?
One really common one is a look-back period. The source says NEDs usually need to have been free of any significant business, financial, or other ties to the company for a set time before they join the board.
How long, usually?
Often 3, maybe 5 years. Depends on the country.
And significant ties means things like
not having been an employee recently, or the company's auditor, or a major supplier or customer. Even being a significant shareholder can be disqualifying sometimes.
Got it. What else?
Another big one is banning cross-directorships.
Remind me what that is again.
That's where, let's say, the CEO of company A is a non-executive director on company B's board.
Okay.
While the CEO of company B is also a non-executive director back on company E's board.
Right. They're basically overseeing each other.
Exactly. And the source argues that makes the boards too close, too cozy. It potentially dulls the edge of their scrutiny. You might hesitate to challenge someone you'll be reporting to on another board next week.
Yeah, I can see that. Awkward. Anything else?
Restrictions, or sometimes outright bans, on giving share options to NEDs.
Okay, why specifically share options? How does that link to independence?
Well, the thinking, according to the source, is to help NEDs stand slightly apart from the executive team. Share options tie your compensation directly to the share price, which can create pressure to focus on short-term gains.
Right, maybe actions that boost the stock now but aren't great long-term.
Potentially. So by restricting or banning options for NEDs, the hope is they can offer advice and challenge decisions based on broader, long-term shareholder value and good governance, without being swayed by their own immediate financial gain tied to the stock price.
Keeping their focus wider. Okay, that's a subtle but important one. Are there others?
A fourth measure sometimes seen is putting a clause in the NED's contract that allows them to seek confidential external advice, say, from a lawyer or consultant at the company's expense.
Oh, interesting. When would they use that?
If they're unhappy about something, or maybe just uncertain about a major decision or a course of action the board is considering, it gives them an independent channel to get objective advice if they feel they need it.
Like a safety valve, if they feel something's off internally.
Exactly. And one more key thing. Term limits. NED appointments are almost always for a fixed term, like 3 years, typically.
And you can't just keep getting reappointed forever.
Usually not. There are often limits on the number of consecutive terms someone can serve. Maybe 2 terms, so 6 years total, is a common setup.
And the logic there goes back to that familiarity threat.
Precisely. Limiting tenure helps ensure NEDs maintain that necessary critical distance. It prevents relationships from becoming too entrenched over, say, 10 or 15 years, and it also ensures fresh perspectives cycle onto the board regularly.
Okay, so pulling it all together then. Our source material makes it really clear that independence isn't just a nice to have. It's presented as absolutely essential.
Essential, yes. Not just in these specific roles like auditors and NEDs we focused on, but really as a core part of professional behavior generally.
And it's backed up by rules, regulations, codes.
Those concrete measures, especially for NEDs, are there to try and embed it structurally. But fundamentally, the source suggests it's an expectation, something professionals should strive for.
And it's rarely simple, is it? It's that spectrum idea. You're always navigating relationships, trying to stay objective.
Definitely not black and white. You're operating somewhere on that continuum between total separation and, well, being too close.
So thinking about all those measures for NEDs, the look-back periods, no cross-directorships, limits on share options, getting outside advice, term limits, and keeping those ethical threats in mind.
Yeah, this self-interest, familiarity, all of those.
It leaves you with a question, doesn't it? How does that fundamental expectation of independence actually play out in the day-to-day reality? How do people navigate those inevitable relationships and pressures while still upholding that ideal?
That's the ongoing challenge, isn't it?
Yes.
Translating the principle into practice.
Definitely something worth reflecting on, especially as you encounter different professional roles and responsibilities yourself.